Hello chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today! Today we have an engine swap that's been in the game since launch and often gets forgotten about. The 4th generation Mazda MX5 or Miata or Roadster with the LT1 engine from the C7 Corvette Stingray, in this case upgraded to over 900 horsepower in a car that weighs less than a ton. Sounds like a recipe for a spinning top. As usual, all upgrades have been applied, including the wide body and the body rigidity increase, but the settings have not yet been touched except for downforce, which is maxed, and the transmission, which has already been adjusted to suit this car. The wheels are in the standard size. Increasing the size can improve agility at the expense of stability or ride comfort, and decreasing the size can improve how the car handles bumps and curves. It has a front splitter for front downforce, a rear diffuser for a boost to front and rear downforce, and a custom wing set to add maximum rear downforce. The rear ducktail spoiler options won't add as much rear downforce, so with this engine I recommend the big ugly wing. If you're interested in learning more about aero, downforce, or any other aspect of tuning your car, I have a series called Tuning for Beginners which covers everything from suspension to differential to the transmission. The chosen track for today was the Suzuka circuit. As you might expect, I was met with a mountain of wheel spin. This is the unfortunate trade-off when you have gobs of power in a lightweight car that has its engine in the front. This car has very similar statistics to the Alpine A110 from the previous video, but because that car has its engine in the middle, pushing the rear tyres into the ground, it handles its power much better. It also has a higher natural frequency setting than this Mazda, so its stock settings are more suited to these racing tyres. The Miata Vet, by comparison, is almost as floppy and awful as the near 70-year-old Corvette from 2 episodes ago. Nope. To try and reduce body roll, I increased natural frequency and the anti-roll bar stiffness. If the body of the car isn't wobbling all over the place, I might have some better luck controlling it. With the excessive body roll cured, I could now start to focus on the rest of the Mazda lay's issues. It wants to spin like a top, even more so than the Corvette from a few episodes ago. Ha! Miata is the answer. If you even touch the throttle, the instant torque coupled with the car's short wheelbase makes it extremely responsive to accelerator input. As a result, the long swooping corners that this track has many of are extremely difficult.
Move it, you slag.
It also suffers with some slight oversteer when braking. Next up, I adjusted the differential. I was unsure what to do with the initial torque. Decreasing it would make the car more willing to turn in and thus faster, but this car is already very twitchy. Increasing it would make the car less agile and easier to drive, but potentially slower as a result. I decided to increase it for the sake of making the car more stable. I decreased acceleration sensitivity so that the car would not transition to oversteer as quickly on corner exit, and I decreased braking sensitivity to make the brakes feel sharper. The difference was not as dramatic as I had hoped. The MX5 Stingray is just too powerful for its size, like a hobbit with a rocket launcher. As I mentioned before, the short wheelbase makes this car extremely difficult to handle, particularly on low-speed corners, so it still needs more adjustments. For my final tweaks, I increased compression since this car can be bouncy when hitting the curbs. I reduced camber, mainly because it would give the car more traction when travelling in a straight line, hopefully helping with the wheel spin. I added more rear toe in to hopefully help with the power oversteer, and I added some front toe out which can help with overall stability. I also decided to add some ballast weight to the rear of the car, so that there was at least something pushing the rear tyres into the ground. The new 50-50 weight distribution meant that the Chevrolet had more traction overall and was thus slower to spin the rear wheels. Having more weight towards the rear also added some slight oversteer when slowing down, which was somewhat cancelled out by the toe-out adjustments. However, being honest, the Corviata was still a total death trap and will likely need further changes before I dare attempt a lap at the Nurburgring. I ended up making several changes. I lowered the front because it looks cool. I increased the rear anti-roll bar stiffness to help with lift-off oversteer. I reduced rear natural frequency to hopefully help with power oversteer. I added more front toe out and initial torque, and I reduced the front downforce to help with overall stability. and I added quite a bit more ballast weight but kept it to 50-50 distribution. The Chevrolet MX5 has the opposite problem to most of the other cars I test. This car is surprisingly easy to drive through the high-speed sections where most other cars are a hell of a struggle, thanks to its downforce and its relatively stiff modern chassis. However, low-speed corners is where this car completely falls to pieces. It's simply too light, too powerful, and too compact, meaning it's extremely quick to bite you in the arse if you use the throttle too fast. This is one of the engine swaps that I wanted to like and came away from it just kind of wanting to light it on fire. This car is a spiteful little bitch, just like my pet Chihuahua. For this engine swap to be in any way viable, I would strongly recommend removing the supercharger, since the reduction in torque makes the car slightly less snappy and overall nicer to drive. However, with that being said, it's much harder to recommend this engine swap when the car is so nice to drive on its stock engine. With the standard engine, the car sounds good, and despite being a bit slow, it's really very friendly and tame, just like my other pet Chihuahua. If anything, this engine might have actually been more suited to one of the bigger Mazdas, like the Atenza, since it has all-wheel drive. It's a bit of a shame that this car is the only one with the LT1 engine available. In the end, the Chevriata Mazda Vet MX LS5 Sting Roadster got a time of 6 minutes 21, just behind the Alpine from the previous episode, and also behind the Demon Charger, which I would recommend over this any day. So, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my settings helped, or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time, where I'm driving a car that isn't a V8 go-kart. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I'd greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.